Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for part 2 of the April Q&A series. Part 1's up on the channel now if you want more questions answered, but there's more questions to get to. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their CryoSheet graphene thermal pads, which are an excellent alternative to thermal pastes. They offer very high thermal conductivity with no liquid components, so they can't dry out and therefore don't degrade over time like pastes and even liquid metals. CryoSheet is very easy to use, it's extremely durable, and is available in a range of sizes to suit most applications. I've personally done some high-end GPU testing with CryoSheet, and the results were impressive, very similar in fact to that of liquid metal, but without the mess, and of course, no risk of drying out. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. In mid-2024, is AM4, so new, not used, worth it at any price point? It's definitely worth it at any price point, but I think you mean...
For $1.
I think what they mean by any price point is your price point is low.
Yeah,
so
not if they reduce the price to ridiculous levels.
If your price point is entry-level budget sort of stuff,
yep.
Yes, basically DDR4 memory is still cheaper. It's not significantly cheaper, but it is cheaper. I think I did a comparison for this in my, I think it might have been my 5800 X3D versus the Zen 4 X3D series very recently. I did a cost analysis, and you can save more on AM4. It doesn't make sense at the X3D end of the scale, so your 5800 X3D. Doesn't make sense there, but if you're buying a 5600 or 5700X, probably 5700X, they're much cheaper CPUs. You could then justify getting a cheaper, maybe even a B450 board or something like that, or just an entry-level B550, and then 32 gigabytes of cheap DDR4 memory. Then that will be good bang for your buck. I don't know if I necessarily recommend that, but if you're trying to save every last dollar, then that is certainly one of the better options.
Yeah, I think most of the value is really for CPU upgraders. So if you're already on AM4 and you're thinking, should I even invest money to buy an upgrade on the same platform, or should I be saving up that money to do the full platform upgrade to AM5? Certainly products like the 5700 X3D and 5800 X3D present pretty good value for upgraders, and that would be a better choice than potentially like your, 7600, but having to do the full platform upgrade. So yeah, I really think that this probably hasn't changed all that much in the last couple of months or even the last 12 months. It's really either your CPU upgrading, in which case some CPUs make sense, or you're trying to save every last dollar, get the cheapest system, in which case then, AM4 still has some value. But then again, maybe with the release of Zen 5, the AM5 platform will have some cost improvements, especially for last-gen products. So fingers crossed that happens, and within the next, maybe the second half of the year, we'll be talking about AM5 as a great platform for even entry-level system builders. So we'll see.
Fingers crossed. Do you believe that when Zen 5 comes out later this year, that CPUs will be more price/performance than Zen 4? So better price to performance. If so, do you think pricing will go back to the original Ryzen roots of price to performance, or be priced higher? I think I know your answer on this one, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, AMD is now the dominant player for desktop CPUs. So there's little incentive for them to go back to the Ryzen roots, I guess, which the Ryzen roots were all about going from a CPU generation where they had no market share or interest whatsoever because their CPUs were so bad, to creating interest in the CPU. So all the decisions that they made about making them really cheap and offering supposedly, the same performance as an Intel CPU for half the price, which was really only in some applications, not all of the time.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but you copped a lot of hate on this topic, if you recall, and it was about, correct me if I'm wrong, was it the Zen 2 leaked launch specifications prior to Computex?
That's right, because the leak, it wasn't really a leak, it was just BS.
Well, there was a leak about Ryzen 5 becoming cheaper than it currently was and offering more cores and better performance. Something along those lines. Something vaguely along those lines. And you put out a news report calling BS on the whole thing, saying it makes no logical sense. as they become more competitive, they're not going to offer you more. It goes the other way. As they become more competitive, you get less.
Well, in addition to having a couple of sources providing us some pretty good information about conflicting information, let's say.
Sure, the sources were, fairly reliable, horse's mouth type stuff. But you're right. And basically, you laid out to, I guess it was a lot of AMD fans, telling them, look, guys, the reason why you got your Ryzen 5 1600 and your Ryzen 7 1700 so cheap relative to a Core i7 7700K is because they kind of sucked. Like, yes, they could do this quite well and they had some strengths here, but then when it came to the core thing you were buying it for, which was usually gaming, they were well down on performance. So it didn't mean you shouldn't buy them, they were complete garbage, but the very cheap price, that's why it was justified.
Yeah, that's right. And since then, AMD's market share has gone like this, and Intel's has gone, straight nosedive basically. And there's a significant crossover there in like the Zen 3 era where it just totally flipped on its head in terms of sales. So when AMD is in the dominant position, that even in more of a dominant position in CPUs, at least for desktop DIY sales, than NVIDIA are for GPUs, they are just smoking Intel. There is no incentive for them to give you better price to performance products with a future generation, not to the level of your Zen 1, your Zen Plus era where, we saw heavy discounts, great prices at launch that was designed to increase their market share. They have increased their market share. There's nowhere else for them to go. So, I'm not saying that they will be more expensive. I think that they'll be looking at what sort of prices they could get away with. And like NVIDIA sees with the GPU side of things, AMD also has to compete with themselves. They need to convince people who are already on AM4 systems and they've maybe bought a 5800X3D, one of the most successful CPUs they've made. They have to convince those people that it is worth buying another CPU. So they can't make them so ludicrously expensive that no one is going to be buying any CPUs, even if they're in a dominant market position. But they're not going to be offering crazy discounts. If anything, you will see older generation parts, the Zen 4 stuff, will be available at lower prices because, best case scenario, they'll slot in new products that are faster at the same or similar prices. The old models will get a bit cheaper, which just happens, even throughout the Zen 4 generation as it is with no new parts. Some of the models have gotten cheaper over time. So we'll see more of that, and hopefully that will give people good price to performance parts, good incentive to upgrade from AM4, new entry-level stuff, which is really what the AM5 platform needs, because a good $150, $120 CPU would be amazing for that platform. But I highly doubt that will be offered directly via Zen 5.
In a sense, it's surprising, as you say, that they've discounted even flagship gaming parts like the 7800X3D.
Yeah, that's right.
At all.
Yep.
But then if you think about it, again, they wouldn't. Why are they doing that? They're not doing it to be nice guy AMD. Oh, GPUs are so expensive. Let's give the guys a break and give them some affordable Zen 4 CPUs. Absolutely not the case. So why are they doing it? One reason could be that, they have a lot more Zen 4 than they would have liked to have had at this point in time. And with Zen 5 coming, they want to clear that out at a reasonable price rather than a fire sale price.
Yep.
And that situation could make sense because when Zen 4 did land, I'm sure AMD probably predicted more demand and more hype around them than they got. Like, those things kind of landed like a lead brick. Like, they just...
No one was interested in them, really.
Motherboards were way too expensive. Memory was absurdly too expensive. So very few people cared about AM5 when it was first released. And that was probably true for a good 6 months. And you saw AMD try various things to make that platform and those CPUs more appealing. So they probably miscalculated how well that would sell for probably the first 6 months. So that might have something to do with it as well.
Yeah, but I think another reason as well is that if let's say you've got a 7800 XUD and you're selling it for, what was the MSRP? 450?
Yeah.
If they've already sold that CPU to everyone that was interested in buying it at $450, then that CPU will have no further sales. So a typical marketing tactic that we see, especially from AMD, is they sell it at the highest price that they can to begin with, and then over time they go, okay, everyone that was interested in at $450, we've saturated that, let's bump it down to $400. Let's capture a new set of people interested in buying that CPU. And they do that as the lifespan of that product goes along, including with their GPUs. So
just it keeps them flowing out the door at a reasonable pace. Because there will still be people who obviously, I know what you meant though when you say they've sold it to all the people that would pay $450. They've sold it to the bulk of the people who was interested. There'd still be more people that are interested, but it would slow the demand significantly. So rather than try and sell it to $450 for a handful of people, they're like, well, we'll sell it for $380 or whatever it is to many more people. And
yes, they're juggling that, right? They're thinking, if we can get 20% more sales at a lower price, we'll in total make more revenue or profit from that from that CPU. So some companies can get away with not doing that. We see Nvidia at times not do that with their GPUs because clearly they just get a certain amount of sales over the lifespan of that product that they're very satisfied with. And I think games as well maybe play into a little bit more. People upgrade at different times and so on with GPUs. But yeah, AMD has this philosophy, and they've done it for all their CPUs really, where over time they get a bit cheaper. But yeah, like with Zen 5, they're going to be debuting at a price to performance ratio that is going to be around where the CPUs land in terms of performance. So if they're much more powerful, then potentially you will see them debut at higher prices, but hopefully there'll be enough value there when they come out that they're not, like a 7900 XT GPU where they're kind of ridiculous to begin with and then drop in price shortly after. So we'll see where they've learnt lessons there, but Zen 4, I still think, even if there wasn't huge demand at launch, it wasn't like it was an awfully priced product at launch. It was still reasonably powerful at times. It had its benefits, but it just wasn't anything amazing. It was it was what it was.
The problem was the CPU, not so much the CPUs themselves, it was the motherboards and memory. Yeah. Both of which I think cost more than some of the CPUs. Yeah. So that's a bit of a showstopper there.
Yeah.
How often do you find yourself consciously selecting hardware to have it run at default versus with minor tweaks versus, is that extensive tuning? How has that changed over the years? I was going to say extreme tuning because I'm so used to saying extreme tuning. Extensive, how has that changed over the years? For me personally, and we've talked about platforms, back in the Core 2 Duo days, Core 2 Quad, that's probably when I would have done the majority of my overclocking, like up to that point and prior.
Yeah.
And then with sort of the what would you say, the Sandy Bridge, all of those generations that followed that were much the same all the way up to, like, say, Skylake. As you went through that period, less and less overclocking and more just running at defaults. There was periods where we'd play with memory tuning and try that out, and there were varying degrees of success with that. So yeah, I'd say these days it's more default type stuff than it is overclocking, simply because GPU overclocking sucked probably since like the 980 Ti. It's been pretty well pointless, like very pointless. You're talking about a couple of % for risking stability. It absolutely is not worth it. CPU overclocking is more been tuning of stuff like voltages and things like that, and more memory based, which again varying degrees of success there depending on the CPU doing it with. Stuff like X3D, it's largely a waste of time, and again a lot of effort, very hard to validate stability. If you are a competitive gamer or you absolutely care about gaming, you would sacrifice that percentage of performance for 100% stability if that can be achieved or thereabouts. So yeah, I think that's my answer. Like, it's become less of a thing.
Yeah, it's really these days just the only thing that I would really change in like the motherboard BIOS when I set up a new system is XMP. Mm-hmm. Like, that's it. And that's almost a default setting.
It's a universal thing, really.
Like everyone does it, but yeah, like all the other stuff, like you go to the overclocking menu, it's like feature after feature, setting after setting. I'm just like, no.
Yeah, there are some benefits to be had with certain things you can undervolt without losing performance, and it improves efficiency. But again, that's silicon dependent. It's not a universal. None of that sort of stuff. None of that tuning tweaking is universal. You can apply it to any of those configurations. It's an individual thing, really.
Yep.
There are safer settings than others for sure, but it's the return on investment has gotten a lot worse.
Yeah.
All right, Tim, tell me, why are people still obsessed with ultra settings?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that about like any high-end product, right? Like, why people are obsessed with high-end cars, or why people are obsessed with, RTX 3090s, or products where there's, the bang for buck value isn't necessarily there buying high-end products a lot of the time, the flagship premium stuff. The bang for buck's usually somewhere around the middle of the range. So you can say the same thing about ultra settings, right? Like the bang for buck settings are usually high settings, medium settings, some combination of those. But people see ultra and they're like, that's the highest setting. I want that. I want the game to look the best that it can look. And there's a setting there. It's labeled ultra. That must mean it's the best. So yeah, like that's kind of the reason why people want ultra setting gaming, even if it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And in a lot of situations, you're better off playing on high or medium settings, or using upscaling and optimizing individual settings, right? So yeah, like our advice would generally be you should probably tweak some things, turn some things down that don't make a lot of sense. But I totally understand the mindset of wanting the best of the best, and certainly people who are buying 4090s and those type of products probably want the best of the best ultra settings. But I think for game developers, there's certainly ways that you could make it so that people aren't just turning up to ultra settings and complaining about the performance being awful. I think having some settings that go beyond ultra or are not included in presets that you specifically have to turn on is kind of a better way of approaching it. I think if high settings were renamed ultra in a lot of situations, people would be very content with the performance and optimization of those games. And if they restricted the ultra settings to like an extreme preset or any name that makes it sound like you probably shouldn't be turning that setting on, then that would probably improve the situation a lot. But it's just the way it goes with a lot of products. People want the best of the best and are attracted by the shiny stuff. And that's not going to change anytime soon, I don't think.
All right. We look like we have a question here from Discord member, Steve's incompetent friend. Does not narrow it down at all. Sorry. Could be talking about Tim. No, I'm kidding. Sorry. All right. The question is, what's with the new range of B650 boards still sporting VGA and PS2 ports? So why do we have these old legacy ports on these new entry-level boards, Tim? Or, oh no, it was me that was I supposed to answer it?
You're the motherboard guy.
Yeah, sorry, I'm being incompetent. Like all my friends. The answer is basically these are entry-level budget boards, and they're probably targeting the OEM market that tends to hold on to legacy connectivity for reasons that aren't really clear to me. Like, when are you going to use a VGA board?
I imagine it's like they're making a board and they're like, oh, we can't have no boards with VGA just in case there's some business customer that's still using monitors from 25 years ago. So if they want to upgrade their PC but not their monitor, then maybe we should offer some sort of VGA capable system there.
It's true. It's quite staggering how a lot of those industries use such ancient technology for such expensive, complex systems, but they do. So that's pretty much why. It's just compatibility with more business commercial type use is my guess. Certainly not for gamers. Yeah.
And it could be one large customer requests that feature of a specific board. Like, we would like to order 10,000, 100,000 motherboards because we're doing a big replacement of systems, but we need this specific port on the board. So then they'll go to a motherboard maker, they'll slightly modify their boards so that those systems can be made. That's typically what I would see as a reason for including that. Because, like all the gaming boards don't have VGA on them, really, like the main ones that you'd be buying. And PS2 has been replaced by USB because good luck finding a gaming RGB mechanical keyboard that uses PS2. Probably doesn't exist.
Yeah, and that's why the VRMs on those boards are so trash tier as well, because as people point out, they will be designed for a Ryzen 5 processor because that's probably what they're using in that environment. They don't need a Ryzen 9, and that's fine. But for consumers buying the boards, not so great because they cost the same amount as boards that can support 200 watts and they can only support 90 watts. So there's no point spending $120 on a 90 watt board when for the same money you can get a 200 watt plus board. So that's just the VRM angle that sort of came into that content. Was Direct Storage or DirectX 12 Ultimate in general overhyped? I think the short answer from me is yes. I think these features are often overhyped, or at least people expect them to do more than what they're going to do, or be more widely adopted than what they ultimately end up being adopted in the near term. It's almost like tech demo stuff. Like, here's what can be done in this generation. We're implementing it now, and by the next generation, it will actually be usable. And we say with ray tracing and lots of different technologies like this, they don't burst on the scene. And there's very few examples you can point to that have burst on the scene and changed things completely. Has happened, but
certainly not in any short or reasonable period of time. Like I'll often when these features are announced, like DirectX 12 was announced so long ago now. Even the Ultimate version was announced ages ago. Direct Storage was announced ages ago. People are I think people realize that it's not going to be coming out immediately, but even then they underestimate how long it's going to take. So even with some DirectX 11 features, it was well into the DirectX 12 generation when they were being utilized. And with Direct Storage, yeah, there's a couple of games that are utilizing it right now, same with some DX12 Ultimate features, but we're not even close to the end of the DX12 lifespan. Like, it could still be another 5 years until some DX12 Ultimate features are utilized in any significant way. There's a lot of features that, if you go back and look at the announcement, things like mesh shaders have only just started to be utilized. Work graphs are sort of a newer feature that's being talked about at the moment. It's very unclear when those features are going to be widely adopted, and you should probably in most cases assume like a decade after the announcement. So like Direct Storage, it's a good feature, like there's nothing wrong with it as a feature, but there's always that expectation that this will come into games in the next few years. But the reality is usually, games now taking even longer to make. Engine upgrades are taking longer. It often needs like a next gen engine to get those features in. I don't know, we could still be sitting here in 2026 and Direct Storage is still not utilized in a lot of games. So yeah, these features genuinely take a lot of time. So I don't think the quality of the feature has been overhyped. It's just that it takes time. Yeah,
that's right. The support of the feature and when it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, Tim, do you think AM5 will go end of life in 2025, or will it keep going beyond that, similar to AM4 has?
Will it go end of life? I'd like to think it wouldn't.
I would very much like to think it won't. My expectation is that it won't, whether that is misguided or completely wrong. I mean, yet to be proven, but I would...
What do they mean by end of life? Do they mean like no future CPU generation, so no Zen 6?
That would be my understanding, yes.
Or do they mean no more products at all? Because a product like AM4 isn't even end of life because they keep still making new CPUs for that platform. Well, I'm assuming they mean no Zen 6, but maybe...
Technically, they haven't made any new AM4 CPUs. There's no new architecture. There's no refined architecture. There's no...
Right, I'm talking about rebrands.
They've been... Everything that's come that is technically new, let's say, is just bin silicon.
Yeah, but I guess they can claim that the AM4 is an end of life because we're making a new 5700 X3D or whatever.
Yeah, it's an end of life platform that's still being supported, and it's their dumping ground to get rid of all of the bin silicon.
That's right. How many Zen 3 CPUs are there now? Like 4,000?
Yeah, it's insane.
So,
I only say that because some of them are a bit misleading and a bit garbage. Not a fan. But yeah, end of life for me would be, that's it. No more chipsets, no more CPUs. We're going to a new platform. The platform will still exist. We may have still stock that's being sold for that platform, but it's effectively done.
Yeah, I mean, I think the wording that they used in the original announcement of AM5 was supporting it to 2025 plus. Now, I would say that if you end support in 2025, if you've said 2025 plus, that you have been largely misleading. Because if you were going to support to 2025, you wouldn't put the plus on there now, would you?
They also, again, I've brought this up before, I can go dig it up, but in the initial Zen 4 release materials when talking about the AM5 platform, AMD advertised one of the key features being platform longevity. Now, you can't advertise platform longevity without offering it. And 2 generations is not advertisable platform longevity because it's just like...
Yeah, but these companies and they can weasel out of things by saying, well, we meant platform longevity. Like, you know what they're going to say? They would say, well, while there's Zen 4 and Zen 5 on AM5, we actually released 4 generations because we released the non-X3D parts, then the X3D parts, and then the non-X3D, then the X3D. And so we've done 4 releases and launches on AM5. So therefore, you've had 4 opportunities to buy processors, which, let's be very clear, we will not be accepting that because that's just complete BS. But whenever they're using things like 2025 plus or platform longevity, it's really open to interpretation.
I think the goal is they want to support it as long as it makes sense, and they want to have another successful platform like AM4, but they don't want to commit themselves to a disaster where
That's right.
they can't actually move forward with that, but they want to, like what we were talking about before. Like if they run into a situation, for whatever reason this hypothetical situation may be, where they can attain a 40% performance boost, but they can only do it by moving to a new socket, and it's a cost-effective way of doing it, then they're like, do we do that? We want to do that, and if we don't, we may only be able to offer 10%, whether that's competitive enough. And
they don't want to box themselves in by saying, in 4 or 5 years from now, we have to do this, because if the competition is much stronger than they're anticipating, then maybe they have to make a few decisions there. Again, that's always hard because CPUs take a long time to design, so they have to still predict. But they're straddling that line, aren't they, where they're trying to give you the impression they're giving platform longevity, but they don't want to restrict themselves.
But I know what you're saying.
They don't want to restrict themselves in case they need to backtrack on
They're like,
that.
look, guys, we're going to offer you this, probably. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the intention, probably.
Yeah, but I would say that if Zen 6 is not supported AM5, that AMD has been largely misleading in advertising platform longevity and talking about 2025 plus or whatever.
Oh, there'll be a negative AMD video coming.
There would be, not just a negative AMD video, there will be large community backlash from people, I would think. There might be some defenders saying, well, they didn't technically promise Zen 6 on the platform.
There'll definitely be some defenders for sure.
Yeah, okay, they didn't technically promise Zen 6 support, but I don't think any reasonable person who saw platform longevity advertised would have taken that to mean 2 generations.
Yeah.
I think that's unreasonable.
Don't be an AMD defender. Like, don't do that. It's not good. Like, the amount of people that defended AMD for trying to axe AM4 support, saying that AMD didn't promise that, blah, 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 they shouldn't. It's like, what?
Yeah, wasn't the claim back then that there were technical reasons that they couldn't support it, and then like a week later they're like, yeah, actually we can.
Yeah.
So, don't buy those reasons to begin with. But
again, in that situation, whether they were technically in the right or not, whether they technically said whatever they said, they strongly insinuated that it was going to be a platform that would be supported for a long time, and people were expecting wide platform compatibility, not moving forward this will work, that won't work, and all this weirdness.
And I think companies as well, if the general community is getting that impression from your marketing materials and you know that it's wrong, so internally, if everyone is saying, this is great, you've just announced AM5 and it's going to be supported until Zen 6, but then internally you know that Zen 6 is not supported on that platform, I think you have a duty to inform people that that's not the case, because otherwise it gets into categories of being misleading. Like, I would like to think that if AMD knew when they launched AM5 that Zen 6 was not supported, but everyone was saying in the community, getting excited and hyped that Zen 6 would be supported, that they should have been clarifying that. They should have done the right thing effectively, which is clarifying.
And if they don't do this and we go after them for not doing what we think they should have done, like I saw someone saying Hardware Unboxed made that content piece attacking AMD for ending support, which they eventually reverted on, because Hardware Unboxed promised to their viewers that their AM4 boards would work with all CPUs. Like, no, we told you what AMD told us. We didn't make any claims that we didn't just make stuff up. Like, we're not sitting here saying Zen 6 will definitely work on AM5. We're telling you that's the impression that AMD has given us. And we've never said that will definitely be the case. We've just said that future performance, future compatibility, we don't know for sure. But AMD has said they're committed to this platform. One of the key features of the platform is longevity. Like, they've said that in their materials to us. And it's yet to be seen where the platform goes. But that's what they've led us to believe. And I think they've also directly led the public to believe that. So that's the expectation there. It's been set by AMD. If AMD came out and said, if they made no mention of it at all, then we would ask them, like, is AM5 going to be, it's going to be as broadly supported as AM4 was. And if they're like, well, we're not willing to talk about that at this point, then we'd be like, oh, okay, there's a red flag, guys. AMD's not committing to any kind of platform compatibility. But
I mean,
every time we've asked them, they've said they liked what they did with AM4 and that's what they want to try and reproduce.
And I think the choke point for them will come once Zen 6 starts appearing in more roadmaps, because they haven't really announced Zen 5 in any serious way. It's in roadmaps, but it's not like they've done this big announcement. And usually when there's announcements of new products, they start talking about, oh, this is our product now and this is what the next couple of years is looking like. Zen 6 is going to be on those charts at some point. So once they start announcing and labeling it as Zen 6, the question will be coming to them, is Zen 6 support on AM5? And if they're being very cagey and being a bit, as you say, like not really committing to it, not really talking about it too much, I'm going to start being a little suspicious of that. Whereas if it's like, hey, we're committing to AM5, Zen 6 is supported, all good, all rosy from there. And let's be clear, when they announce Zen 6 and to start talking about it on roadmaps, they will know whether it is or isn't supported on the platform. They're not making that decision like a month before launch. It is set in stone for quite a while. So it'd be very fair to ask those questions, and you can expect that they will be asked. And let's hope that they have a good answer for it, and an answer that is acceptable, really. All right, that wraps up part 2 of the Q&A series. Plenty of questions that have been asked by you guys, whether that's in our Discord community or via the YouTube community tab. It's been a good month, lots of interesting questions, but potentially that's because we were a bit lax on the Q&A series over the last couple of months. To be fair, nothing much has been happening, so
it's not our fault.
Yeah, we took a bit of a break there, but yeah, that's meant that there's been kind of a backlog of interesting questions from you guys. So yeah, do appreciate it. As mentioned, Patreon and Floatplane, that's where you get access to the Discord community, which has sort of this priority Q&A lane where you can ask your questions, and I don't know, there's fewer of them in there, so we tend to pick a few more of them.
It's pay to be answered.
Yeah, well, we do still ignore some of the people, so...
Don't tell them that.
Also, we were floating the idea of having Steve insult you via a paid option, so we're thinking about that. Not sure whether it's been rolled out by the time that...
it's an avenue we're exploring
Q&A,
for sure.
Yeah, so let us know if you want that feature in the comments below. Live streams, BTS content, other stuff. Let's just throw that in there, even if it's maybe not true. And yeah, that's about it for this one. I'm your host, Tim.
I'm your host, Dave.
See you in the next one.